This show is sponsored by Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today has spent over 20 years in the high-end furnishing industry, projects with a number of major design firms, helping to create textiles and interior products suitable to the needs of the hotel industry and their discerning customers. She began Floor 13 Textiles in 2012 with the concept to exercise a unique positioning between design firm clients and weaving sources to create a collection suitable for these contract designers' particular needs. She is an overachiever with a desire to learn and grow, to serve a higher purpose, which is to help those around her to be strong enough to change the world. Please welcome Kathleen Bennett.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm happy to have you on the show today. I know we've met a couple times at different networking events.
Yes,
with Dutchess Chamber.
With the Chamber, yes.
Yeah, and we've talked a little bit about the podcast, and we've talked about your business and everything. So it's kind of it was really nice when I saw your intake form come through, and that you went through with it, because I know there was a little apprehension or a little not sure uncertainty. But I'm so happy to have you here today.
Yeah, this is definitely a first time for me, so it's exciting.
Well, it's a lot of fun, and as we talked about, it's really about you, and I'd love to just jump into that because as I was writing out your bio, some of it I took from your About page and other things that I saw written about you, but the part where I wrote overachiever was what I read in the bio that you submitted to me in the intake form. And so I would love to go back to those college days to where you were just a college student in fashion and thinking about fashion. And by the way, I have to bring up your beautiful coat and your wardrobe today. I know that, you know, people, you'll be able to see it on the YouTube channel, but just such a fashionista. But you were all into fashion, but still it didn't stop you from looking into other subjects and really exploring other things, even when others didn't think that was the best idea for you.
Yeah. So, I studied fashion design. I went to Marymount, which no longer exists. It's now part of Fordham, but it was in Tarrytown, New York. And it was a women's Catholic college, one of the last ones, which was unique in itself. But while studying fashion, I kind of started having this realization that fashion design is a business. It's an art, yes, but it's also very much a business. And all of the fashion designers that I admired at the time, Donna Karan was huge at the time, aging myself. But, Calvin Klein, it was all these businesses. And it just kind of went beyond pinning and sewing the fabrics. So in college, you have electives, and all of my friends, especially in the design programs, they would take, art as an elective or, something. And they're like, I just got to, get my GPA up and have the easy A. And I was like, but I have the opportunity. I'm paying for college. I'm paying to learn. So I started taking accounting. I started taking business law. I started taking macro and microeconomics, and everybody was like, what are you doing? Like, you're no good at math, You're taking all these courses that you're not going to excel in. And I said, well, I don't know why I feel compelled to do this, but I feel like it's important. I feel like when I go on the job interviews, my GPA isn't going to matter as much as them looking, wow, not only do you have a degree in fashion, but you also took all these electives. I feel like that just made me more well-rounded when I went into the workforce.
Yeah.
And there was kind of also this thing that if I become a fashion designer, if I become the next Donna Karan or Calvin Klein or whatever, I'm going to need to know how to run that company.
Right, which then did happen for you, right?
Yeah, but I didn't really expect it, though.
You weren't expecting it.
No.
But it's interesting, though, that you did attach yourself to these entrepreneurs in Donna Karan and Calvin Klein, because while you didn't expect it, you kind of were planting the seed early on, maybe not knowing. Yeah,
that's what I look back on it now, and I'm just like, whoa, like I knew, but I didn't know. It was just very strange.
It is. It's funny how those things kind of circle back. So what got you into fashion? So before even college now and, getting into this, what was the big moment in your life where you thought of fashion as being something that you wanted to get into?
My mom immigrated here from Belgium, and she had a sewing machine. It was kind of there was a kind of thing where it was even more common back then that people were still making their clothes, but not it. What you still had pattern making stores and fabric stores in a lot of towns. But it wasn't as popular maybe as it used to be. But I loved going to the store with her and the freedom of selecting a pattern, right? And then you can also select the fabrics. And so, it just, instead of just buying something off of the rack, it was oh, wow, this is really cool, and I could even split, the outfit with this pattern and that pattern. And here's this cool fabric and there's that cool fabric. And I just started playing when I was young enough. And my mom taught me how to sew when I was little. And, she always made our Halloween costumes. We never had the store-bought Halloween costume. We always had this sewn made Halloween costume. We would go to the fabric store with her and we'd pick out the pattern and we would pick out the fabrics and we would help her make the Halloween costume. So it was always just kind of something happening in the house.
If it makes you feel better about your age, because you said you were dating yourself, I remember my grandmother making me my Halloween costumes. I have one in particular that stands out, which was oh my goodness, what was the cartoon? I just had it in my mind for us. I think it was called Thundercats? Not Thundercats. It wasn't Thundercats. But it was in that cartoon sequence. And they were these silver flying people. Oh my goodness. Silverhawks. That's what it was.
Oh my goodness.
Silverhawks.
I think I remember that. Yes.
So I was actually Silverhawk. My grandmother made the Silverhawk costume for me. I remember that. So, that's pretty funny, pretty interesting that you brought up the Halloween costumes. Yeah. So that's what I remember.
So it was kind of funny, here you have this flexibility and this amazing, talent to almost make these costumes. And I would always be jealous over the kids with the plastic costumes with the plastic mask. Why can't everybody else has that and I have to go in this,
Right.
But yeah.
But you look back and it was unique.
It was unique.
I don't know if back then for me, I know there was an Amazon, so I don't know if we would have found a Silverhawks costume.
Probably not. I remember my brother went one year. Since I told you my mom's from Belgium, right? The Smurfs are originally from Belgium. Oh, wow. So we would go to Belgium as kids, but nobody knew about them in the United States yet. So they were Schtroumpfs. And so he went to school as a Schtroumpf. And so he was blue with a thing and nobody knew what he was. And he was trying to explain. Everybody thought he was an alien.
That's wild. Do you know any stories about the Smurfs as to why they are Smurfs? So Strumpf, I guess, was easier to say Smurf.
Just when they came over to the U.S., they changed the name because it's easier to say.
That's interesting.
Strumpf. Yes.
Back to your, in this, this moment here where you're shopping with your mom and you're exploring fabrics and feels. Were you also making your own clothes then at that time, or?
Yeah, I kind of was, or I was helping her more. Thank goodness for Barbie dolls and tissues because they had the most amazing tissue dresses. I would just take tissues and I would just kind of, drape them and make my own little tissue outfits and then I would throw it away and move on to the next one. So Yeah, that's just kind of, now we have iPhones, but back then I just had a Barbie doll and a box of tissues.
So you were just exploring different motifs with it. So this whole like fashion thing kind of evolved from this childhood fantasy, but it was making clothes. And now you don't make clothes. You actually make more of these. You come up with fabric designs for hotels and all these cool things. Yeah,
the only sewing I do now is when we have to do our sampling, or if my twins need the new Girl Scout patch sewn on.
So do you miss making clothes or anything like that, or?
No.
No, okay.
No, okay. I don't, which is so weird because it was such a part of my past, but no.
It sounds like when you kind of like go back on it, it's the feeling, the fabrics and everything, which is really what you do at Floor 13, which by the way, we're going to talk about it. The name is pretty neat, how you came up with the name. I thought that's neat. And then so ironic on what it ends up becoming for you.
I know.
So we're going to get there, but my first question before we go there is, out of college, you ended up landing some jobs, but one was in the Chrysler Building. And so I am so inquisitive as to what it was like to work in the Chrysler Building at the time, where the Chrysler Building, the Empire State Building, working in New York City at that time, those buildings, not that they're not significant today, but back then, especially in, just the way that New York City was, what that feeling was like and what that experience.
I feel like you can't even see them in the skyline anymore.
Right.
It's like that's so weird, right?
Yes.
But acting there. It was an investment banking and a mergers and acquisitions firm that did mergers and acquisitions in the banking industry. So if one bank wanted to buy another bank, they would contact this firm and we would put these packages together. And I kind of landed in it because in high school I was working in an office doing bookkeeping, and that's another story on how I landed there. It's just like these weird things. But so a friend of my mother said, "Oh, we need we're looking for an intern, paid intern. And I think you would be perfect." And I said, "Perfect. It's investment banking. I'm studying fashion, And she says, no, come in. So I started working in mergers and acquisitions while I was in college at the Chrysler Building, which was really just incredible. We were on the 51st floor, I believe. So the view was fantastic. And just so you know, a little sidebar, on the top of the Chrysler Building at that time was a dentist office. So the tippity top floor was a dentist office that had like 360 views of the, Manhattan, of everything. So I was like, my goodness, how expensive is that dentist? But anyway, I digress. So, yeah. So,
well, I'm interested in how much you charge for a crown, right?
Exactly. But, so that was just kind of really, neat. And I stayed with the company for all through college. They gave amazing bonuses. They paid really well. And so I would construct my schedule, with classes around having a day or two extra to go down into the city. So, I was really just like, in college on the phone and meeting in person these titans of banking, because they all knew this firm and they would call and they'd say, "Oh, Kathy, how are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, good, Mr. Mason," from like Mason or something. And it was like it was just crazy, but it was a lot of fun. And, everybody in the firm, we all got along. And so it was just a great experience.
What did you learn from that?
It brought me more into the business side. I did do an internship with Simplicity Pattern Company, so that was kind of neat for me. But, they had me in a closet separating hangers, and I wasn't really learning anything about the business. I wasn't. So this was just kind of like, wow, this is like not only how fashion goes, right? This is how the business world goes, because banking, I mean, like everybody has to touch a bank, right? Like, So this is how everything flows. This is how things work. So it was like a bigger picture, and just commuting into the city and, meeting different people that way, just in general, it just kind of gave me more of a sense of, just the bigness of the world, right? Outside of what I was studying.
Yeah. And so you said, and commuting to the city, where were you living at the time?
Living in Yonkers.
Living in Yonkers, okay.
Yeah, shout out to Yonkers.
Okay.
But yeah, so it was a 20-minute train ride.
Right.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to fashion on this too, because you're commuting to the city, and again, you're at the Chrysler Building. So there's so much fashion happening around you. There's suits, and now women are in business, and so they're wearing, different types of suits and blouses and all these different things. Did that have any impact?
It did. Well, that's actually, I brought up Donna Karan earlier. Yes. That's kind of when she started kind of emerging onto the scene. And she really changed the whole landscape of how women would dress for work. She had, she introduced the peekaboo shoulder, where the shoulder started kind of coming out, and the bodysuit, and this whole kind of idea of getting out of the business suit, and kind of you could look professional and just have this amazing style. So that was very, and I became kind of like a Donna Karan junkie back then. But yeah, so it was just this whole idea that moment, and it was the early 90s, that moment was changing a lot for fashion. You had, all of the top models there, like Cindy Crawford and everything. Now you don't really know unless they're an influencer. But there was this whole thing with Versace and everything. It was a lot of energy back then around fashion.
I have one, I want to talk about the suits for a second, but I have a vivid memory. So I grew up in Queens, and we would always take the 59th Street Bridge into the city. And there was a billboard, DKNY. Always, as soon as you got off the bridge of the 59th Street Bridge, the DKNY, and I remember that's how I learned about DKNY, was because my mother, I'd be like, what is DKNY? I mean, I know Biggie Smalls ended up singing about it, but rapping about it, but that was my first knowledge of what it was. She was like, that's Donna Karan, New York, so it was kind of neat. Back to the suits thing though. We're on the same page on that. It's so funny. I was just having this conversation. I can't remember with who it was recently, where I don't wear a suit really that often anymore. And the reason for it is just that what you said is that you can dress professionally with style, and where a suit doesn't have to define what you really do or who you are as a business professional, right?
Correct. I mean, I feel like clothes just there's just an opportunity to be yourself.
Expressive.
I wouldn't even say, maybe it is a creative, yes, but just who are you? Don't instead of just putting on a suit and a tie and that's, there's so much expression. And, it's funny, we go to the chamber events, and there's some people that just kind of they do stand out, because you could say, okay, I know who that person is, instead of, it's just kind of, I don't know, it's fun.
Yeah, it is. And what I'll say to that too is just because, this whole podcast is about helping our entrepreneurial community and our business community is, I mean, from you're a CEO of a business, I own a business, and we look for employees. And times have changed. And so there was probably a time where suit and tie was a necessity.
Yes.
But for me, what I look for is neatness in attire. Is that, how do you carry yourself? How do you dress? Because I remember this. I started my career at Yellow Book, and they had a dress code of sorts, right? And you would see people come in with their slacks or their shirt that they're supposed to wear, but it wasn't tidy. It was wrinkled. It didn't fit them properly. It was long. And so their heels were ripped, and, and it's you're meeting the standard.
Right.
But you don't look professional. You'd actually probably look better in a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, because they might actually be cleaner and less wrinkled.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And not only that, now there's social media, right? So you're being photographed all the time.
Right.
And whether you're the owner of a business or even if it's your employees, there's almost a brand now.
Yes, there is a brand.
And that brand is just every single day.
Mm-hmm. That's why I always wear my Den 10 shirt.
Yeah, exactly. I know it's great marketing.
It is my brand. I remember Tom from Talix Media, who you might have met a couple times. He's also a chamber member. He always wears a hat that says Talix on it.
Yes.
You see?
Yes,
you see? You might not know him by name.
Actually, I was thinking about him when I just was referencing people at the chamber.
Yes.
I was like,
you may not know him by name,
that popped into my
but
head.
he always has his Talix Media hat on.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of where I got it with the Den 10 shirt, because I don't really wear a hat. But I'll wear a shirt. And when I decided I wasn't going to wear suits, I said, well, what am I going to wear that brands me for what I want? And it's this. And that's why I always wear my Den 10 shirt. And
people recognize you, but then they also recognize the brand, and it stays in people's head. And it's very important.
And the other thing I do while we're on my dress here, just real quick for you, is because people do notice it, that I wear sneakers. So I wear my sneakers with my jeans. But I specifically choose my sneakers.
Right.
So my sneakers, I'm wearing Steph Curry, and Steph Curry is an NBA player. I follow basketball. But he's a champion. And so that's what I think about when I buy my basketball sneakers, is not always for play. Like for play, I look for what's comfortable, what works, what fits me to play on the court. But when I look for with what I'm wearing here, like my next pair of sneakers that I'll wear with this attire.
Right.
Are champions, and it's because it's who I'm aligning myself with, like your Donna Karens and your Calvin Kleins of the world. So I would assume that these experiences that you had at the Chrysler Building and at the others were part of what played into your overachiever mentality, right?
I love that you picked up like overachiever. Like, no, I'm not, but I think
so
about,
much.
Yeah, no, I am.
But I want to dig deeper into this mentality that you have, and maybe you're not comfortable quite yet calling yourself that, and I totally get that. Because it's just who you are, right? But I'm interested in who, and maybe it was Donna Karen, but who in your life played that role that made you decide to ask more of yourself?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Because it's actually something I've been thinking a lot about these days. I think my biggest idol was Martha Stewart. And I'm still obsessed with her. But she just kind of was able to do everything. And she still is going. She still looks amazing and everything else. But I was also thinking just in terms of my parents and my mom. You know, she came here from Belgium, and she didn't really speak the language. She came over as an au pair through my grandfather was a bigwig in Belgium. He was a ambassador to the UN, and he was friends with Eleanor Roosevelt. So my mom needed. I know we're going to unpack that. Don't worry, everyone. My mom needed an internship here. So au pair. She wanted to come to the United States. So my grandfather contacted Eleanor, and she hooked my mom up with one of her friends. And so that's how she came to the United States. She hated it, but started learning English. So that was in Boston. She moved to New York. And she started working at, I don't remember which department store it was, but she was selling handkerchiefs. And, you know, she did that. And then from there, she just built herself. You know, she didn't go to college or anything else, but she just had this pathway where she went from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And then by the time I was when I was in elementary school, she was, working part-time at the church doing administrative work. And then somehow from there, and it was because of her ability to speak French fluently, she landed in selling semiconductors to France. And all of a sudden, and it was a new industry, she's being paid up the wazoo. And it was just, it was just crazy. And from there, another company pilfered her and she started selling semiconductors to Brazil. And she was like this semiconductor expert, and she went on to get her degree after that, because she just kind of wanted to pursue. But she's like, she started here not even knowing the language. And she just like carved this amazing path for herself. So, that was kind of interesting to watch growing up, because I would go, and what she would do is she would bring me into the offices with her. So when she was working at the church, she would bring me into the office and I'd be playing around with a typewriter and she goes, oh, why don't you type this out? Or then she started bringing me to the semiconductor companies, and we would run around the office asking people if they had, again, aging myself, anything to fax. No, it wasn't the fax. Well, they called it a facsimile because we didn't even abbreviate it. There was the telex machine. There we go. And so I was obsessed with this telex machine where you could take a piece of paper and send it over to France or Brazil or wherever she was working. It was kind of neat. So I just run around the office and see what people needed to do. So I watched her progression. It was as something as a child that I just kind of it doesn't matter. There's possibility just everywhere.
Yeah. So she was always scaling.
She was scaling.
Right?
Yes, exactly. Trendy word there.
She was always scaling. Yeah, we like to use trendy words, don't we? I want to once again remove this dating of yourself because I'm in the insurance world and we're still faxing.
There you go.
We're still faxing.
That's true.
I get that question and they're
I know. And then sometimes I'm when I'm working with my insurance company or something like that, they're like, oh, we need that faxed over. And I'm like,
I know.
What? Can I just PDF? And they're like, no, it needs to be a fax. So I'm running out to the UPS store or something. Yeah.
It kills me. I started Den 10 with the idea of starting this digital insurance company, and it immediately started off the wrong foot on that. Was as soon as I went to go get my LLC, and I'm like, I'm doing this all online. I'm doing it all online. And I get to the end, and I can't complete the LLC online. And I'm like, what is going on? And I'm like, I will figure this out online. This is an online agency. I'm doing it all online. And it starts saying I got to fax and mail and everything. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. There's no way that this is true.
Yeah.
So I call and they say, well, what are you starting? I said, an insurance company. They go, well, yep, you got to fax or mail. And I'm like, are you crazy?
I know.
And so I ended up having to mail it. The fax didn't work. That's a whole other story. But that's going to be the rest of it. So,
yeah.
So it doesn't end there. But I want to go back to your mom and so this whole scaling. So you watch this progression. This other thing that you brought up and I think is so important for people to realize is your mom had you there. And so there's so much that plays into your story that we're going to keep digging into that I feel like comes from these personal firsthand experiences that you have, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I have 3 kids now and they're all teenagers. One is off, at the ESF school in Syracuse. And the other 2 are in high school, they're twins. And I didn't really think, I work out of my house. My whole company, it's a national company, but we do it all out of my home. And, they're not very interested in it. Once in a while, they'll poke in. Sometimes my oldest helps me with my social media. But, I was like, oh, how come there was such an interest with me and my mom taking me somewhere and maybe it's the phones. I don't know, but it does play into it. And I thought it was going on deaf ears. And then, Emma, who's my oldest, she's applying for an internship at the White House because, we shoot small in my house. And she's like, Mom, stop talking about that because what if I don't get it? I'm like, it doesn't matter. You're trying, right?
That's it, yeah.
But she sent me the essay and it was all about how my mom built this company from nothing and I watched her. So there is this thing and I watched my mom and my mom would bring me into the office. So yeah, I knew how to office, right? So I knew how to build the company. I knew the who reports to who and what you needed to get done, the responsibilities. It was all something that I just witnessed. And my dad, we even brought me into his work too. He worked in, he was a graphic artist. And so he would bring me into their office and they would do advertising for PBS was one of their accounts, and the New York Philharmonic and all of that stuff. And so I would watch them do the posters and kind of help out there too. So yeah, my parents always were bringing me into the office on my days off from school.
Yeah, it's incredible how these experiences that we that you said that we think fall on deaf ears. Yeah, actually is resonating with them. Like for you, going with your mom was probably wondering, she's playing with that darn fax machine again, that telefax. Right, yeah, she's not learning anything.
Can't she just sit and read a book?
Right. But meanwhile, you were learning, you were watching, and I've realized that as I've learned from people like yourself sharing that kind of story with me, and reading it in books of different people, and like I said, different guests coming in and talking about their experience and going to the workplace with their parents or friend or whatever it was. And so for me, I try to bring my girls in as much as I can as well into the business. So I've started doing these videos, these lives on Instagram. And yesterday I closed all the doors. I said to the girls, "Hey, I'm doing a video. Don't disturb me," kind of thing. And I did the video and it was wonderful and all that. And then this morning I was going to do it again and I was about to close the doors and I hear them playing in the background and I hear them and I'm like, you know what? One, it's good for my audience to hear that there's kids here. Yeah. They're part of my life. The company's named after them, right? So they're part of my life. And they're not disruptive. So it's not like you're going to be distracted by their noise. And then two, by having the door open, they hear me. And they hear me speaking to everyone and sharing what I'm sharing. And so they're experiencing it. And what's interesting is like that was my thought before I closed the door. And then I did my video and 10 minutes later, I'm just wrapping up and everything. And my daughter Denise walks by and she goes, "Okay, so you're done with your video? Are you posting it now?" And I'm like, "What? What?" She goes, "Well, you're going to post it now, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah. How do you know that? You're 8." Like, so it's so funny because I never told her that that's what I'm going to do with it. She just knew, which is very interesting on how these experiences go. All right. So we can't let Eleanor Roosevelt escape from our grasp here. Yeah, we have to go there.
It's one of those things that it's just part of.
So share a little bit, if you can, any knowledge that you have of it, of like, how did your grandfather become friends with Eleanor Roosevelt? Because your grandfather's in Belgium. Yeah. Eleanor Roosevelt's in the States, as far as I know. Correct. I mean, obviously married to the president, and so they traveled, I'm sure. And you said your grandfather was a bigwig there in Belgium. So
yeah, he's a lawyer. He was a lawyer. Okay. And a prominent lawyer. So he was the chairman of the International Lawyers Association. Okay. So he would
some sort of connection there in terms of the politics and travel and everything.
Yeah, exactly. So he was appointed to the UN to be an ambassador for Belgium. Mm-hmm. So that's how he met her. And she was starting an organization that she needed his expertise in because it was going to be an international organization.
Do you remember what organization it was?
Yes, I do. So it was UNICEF. Oh, and wow. So he was one of the, he helped her start UNICEF. So
that's like incredible.
Yeah. So my family has the Nobel Peace Prize from it.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
And so then I'm sure because you have the knowledge of this, so you got to hear stories from him or from your mom about this relationship or
the things? He passed away when I was young. So my memory of him is very small. Right. But my grandmother, she was a force to be reckoned with. And I loved her so much. And she would come to the United States, or I'd go to Brussels and stay with her. And so I knew the stories from there. But even like, that's kind of, when I say the Eleanor Roosevelt story, it's kind of like, because it's not this big thing in my family. Sure. So it's just like, it almost is like saying, my first cat's name was Banjo. You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of like, it was never made to be this thing, but it is an interesting story.
Well, it becomes normalized.
It became normalized.
It becomes normalized, which is good to an extent, right? Because I mean, we don't want to put people on too much of a pedestal to where we lose our own self-respect or dignity. But it is Eleanor Roosevelt.
Yeah.
And she is a significant part, not just as a person of, let's put it in context of today. She's not just an influencer, right?
No.
She is a significant part of history.
And she wasn't even like a first lady. I mean, like, she was like
the president's
bam,
right?
Yeah. I mean, this woman knew what to do.
Yeah, so it's very incredible to have that as part of your story, and it only leads me to ask the question of the impact that had on you, because as we go into your story, you share that you didn't have entrepreneurs in your life or in your family. That is, you were like one of the first in your family, and so many people shared what they thought you should be doing or what you should do, and whether they were family or friends or whatever it is.
Right.
But where I'm going with this is, I mean, to be a young girl in wherever you lived at the time, Yonkers, Brussels, wherever you were traveling through, right? And to have this knowledge that Eleanor Roosevelt is part of your family to some extent, right?
Right.
I'm just interested in what that impact might have been, maybe subconsciously for you.
I think the impact was negative, quite frankly. At least if we're talking about me being a little kid, right? Sure. Because I grew up in Yonkers, and it's not growing up in Scarsdale, right? It's quite different, and my parents chose it specifically. They did it intentionally because they just felt that there was a diversity there that they wanted their kids to grow up with. But at the same time, I was flying to Belgium every summer. My uncle had a place in the Swiss Alps, so there was this whole kind of exposure thing that none of the my peers were experiencing, and I wasn't there in the summers to hang out with them, and I would get picked on when,
and that's what you mean by the negative part.
Yeah. So there was kind of like, I remember I still can almost dictate to this day a prank call that I got from one of my classmates pretending to be a friend that I made in Belgium. But she didn't pronounce Belgium right. So she said Belgiuma. And of course, in Belgium, they don't even say Belgium. So, it was just, but and I figured out who it was. And, because I guess when I went back to school, she was like, so how was Belgium on? I was like, oh, that was you. But, there was just kind of like, I don't know. I did live a good, privileged life in a way, in a community where there wasn't as much privilege.
So you stood out to some extent. I mean, again, I can relate to your story, and I wasn't going to share this part, but because I don't want to, but I can relate to it because I remember growing up, and my mother. So we're from French heritage. My mother's from Haiti, but we're French heritage. And I remember growing up and my mother talking about family lineage and being related to Josephine Bonaparte.
Oh.
And so I'm a little kid and I'm telling people I'm related to Josephine Bonaparte and they're making fun of me.
Right.
And so I remember that feeling that you're talking about, and I couldn't connect the dots. Like when somebody would ask me specifically how, and I was like, I don't know. I just know that my mother said that like my great grandmother is first cousins with her, and that's what I know. I don't know how to prove that to you. I don't know anything else, nor does it matter to me, quite honestly. But it's kind of neat, right?
Yeah.
And we all have to be related to somebody, right?
Right.
These famous people aren't related. They're not by themselves in this world. And again, to your point of like traveling, I remember like we traveled as well. So I've been to Brussels when I was a kid.
Yay.
My parents made it a point to go backpacking through all of Europe.
Oh,
and we took
so
all the
nice.
trains and everything. And so we were like a couple days here, a couple days there, and Belgium and Brussels was one of them. And I don't remember Belgium specifically because I was too young, but I remember traveling there. Mm-hmm. And I remember coming back to school and there was like a school essay or something. And I wrote about my travels through all of Europe. And the teacher actually called my parents and said, Michael's making up stories. And my parents said, well, what story is he making up? And he said, well, I remember him, Mr. Amplo. He said, well, Michael's telling everybody and actually ended up writing it in an essay, or I forget what it was, that he traveled through all of Europe. And that's just not true. And my parents were like, well, it is. And, whatever. But the repercussions, so that conversation that happened with my parents and Mr. Amplo were between them. But in the classroom, when he called me out, that was between me and my peers.
Yes.
And what was I to do?
Right.
Right. Yeah. But anyway, it's not about that. I do feel that it still had a positive impact on our lives. And I go to this overachiever mentality of part of why I feel like I need to prove myself sometimes is because of these people that put me down.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I remember that I remember his name, right? And I remember telling my grandmother when she was thinking about college for me and being like, yeah, I'm going to show them.
Yes.
Right? And so I go back to your story of it might have had a negative impact at childhood, but where did it bring you to when you were in college and you're taking all these courses and the confidence that you had to do it?
Yeah, it definitely brought out the fighter mentality. I would say the confidence came much, 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 much later. But yeah, I guess it does build up this kind of fire, right? I mean, when you're the kid at the sleepover that they're writing the L word and, L on, or drawing the mustache on, you kind of, you get this kind of well, I'm not going to be that person, right? I'm better than they think that I am or something. Yeah, there is definitely something.
And not letting a GPA define you. I love this quote that you wrote in my intake form here, which you said, if I'm going to be a fashion designer, I will need to know how to control that business. And, all of those courses kind of came into there. And the word control, you needing to know that you can actually do it. Right? Mm-hmm. Important. Shifting gears a little bit outside of that because we definitely kind of really dug into some backstory there, right? Wasn't that was meaty for everyone? There you go. You're welcome. No worries there. We're going to lighten it up a little bit because you went on to work in now the fashion industry. And please pronounce the name for me of
Okay, so that wasn't fashion. So
it's spelled Donghia.
Yes, that's Donghia.
Donghia.
So
okay.
So that wasn't. So I graduated from college with my degree, and it was the mid-90s, and we were in a recession, and it was extremely hard to get a job. And I moved down to Florida for a little bit, so there's that too. But so I took I flew back up to New York, and I took a position at Bloomingdale's where they had a management training program. And basically they taught you aspects of management. So stuff I didn't even know from college or investment banking, the forecasting and, how to compare this year to last year and what are your numbers like. And I was put into the towel department, much to my dismay, because I really wanted to be in one of the fashion departments, but they stuck me in the towel department. And,
that sounds like torture.
I know. It was torture because for a number of reasons, but people were constantly picking up the towels and unfolding them. So I was a manager scrambling around at 59th Street, Manhattan, constantly folding towels. And then tucked in the back of the towel department is where the executive offices are for Bloomingdale's National. So you had, all of the head honchos for Bloomingdale's coming through my department all the time. So it had to look pristine while people are yanking towels everywhere. And then they would shout, they'd be like, Kathleen, what's your numbers today versus last year? And you'd have to be like, I'm up 60%, or like you had to know off the top of your head. So like it was just kind of this thing. So the towels threw me into interiors. And I really hated Bloomingdale's. I quit because if I had to go through one more one-day sale with people who were fighting, like literally fist fights over towels, because it was nuts, and I just couldn't take it anymore. But I needed a job. So in the New York Times, there was an advertisement for administrative assistant in interior design. And I said, I don't know anything about interior design, but it says design, so why not? Right. And I sent my resume, and it just so happens that they liked what they saw. Sherry Dongia, who is just an amazing person, she studied fashion. So I think there was kind of, a connection there. And I interviewed for the job, and it was actually really funny. So I'm getting shot all these interview questions, I was down with 2 people, and she was giving me all these, like, what are the standard interview questions? And then finally, when she was done, the other person interviewing me says, all right, I got one question for you. And I was like, okay. And she's like, what's your favorite radio station? And I was like, and I think I said like WNEW or something. And she was like, that's mine too. You have the job.
Wow.
So I was like, okay. So I brought into the world of interior design, which I had no clue about. Growing up in Yonkers, you get your furniture from Siemens, right? Or, but this idea that you have an interior designer that's going to design your house, and the sofa that you want, and again, this is the early 90s, is going to cost you $15,000. And that's just the sofa.
Right.
And don't even worry about the fabric, because we haven't even tacked that on yet. And I was like, what the heck is this? Like, I had no idea that there was this
wealth.
Couture or wealth. Yeah, you would think, yes, I knew people bought Versace, and I knew people bought Christian Dior, and that was expensive and I couldn't afford it. But I didn't think about furniture and wall covering and drapery fabric and all of this stuff. And let me tell you, the fabric is so much more fun in interior design, I feel, than it is in fashion, because it's more permanent. And so it's not a throwaway thing. And today we have so much throwaway fashion. It's something you have to live with.
Right.
And even I'm getting so excited right now. Yeah. Even like the construction of a sofa, okay, you could, like, we had this education series. We would cut up a sofa. You'd cut up a sofa from, let's say, Siemens again, which doesn't exist anymore, I don't think, or a sofa from Dongia. And just the amount of craftsmanship that went into the sofa. And they would say, if you bought, I'm doing a big advertisement for Dongia right now. If you,
that's all right.
If you bought, one of their sofas, it would last you like an antique piece of furniture rather than, and we're not allowed to say couch. I
was going to ask. I heard you say sofa so much. I was wondering about couch.
Yeah, no, couch, no. Even my kids were like,
bad word.
They're trained. They're like, somebody once, when the twins were little, and somebody said to them, "Oh, take a seat on the couch." And they looked over and they're like, "Do you mean the sofa?"
That's funny.
So, I mean, there's just this whole world that I just had no idea about. I had the fashion magazines growing up, but I didn't have Architectural Digest or any of this stuff.
Right.
So it was this amazing thing. And I called up my aunt, who actually did work in interior design. And I said, Janet, I have this job offer. I don't know whether to take it or not. It's an interior design. It's for this company called Dongia. She goes, are you kidding me? And I'm like, why? She's like, that's one of the best firms. She goes, how did you land a position there? She's like, take it. So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I took the job.
That's incredible. Did you ever hear of Collaborations by Design? I think it's like a networking type of event down in the city. I'll get you the information on it. But I attended an event, and it's all these interior designers and everything. So I was just a little off topic there. I'm also interested in the word couch and sofa. Is couch like a slang word for sofa? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
It's just a bad.
At least in my world.
Look at you, the face that I'm getting. It's like, don't you ever say that word in my presence again.
Oh my God. Well, you know what? I feel like so it's like so snooty though, right? Isn't it? But
it's your industry.
It is.
It has to do with that. And where I was going to with this experience that you had there was it was funny. Like when I was reading it, you said, I didn't have one mentor there. And I was like, whoa, how did she work at this place and she doesn't have one mentor? Like, that's weird. That doesn't happen, right? And then you said everyone was a mentor. Yeah.
And it's like, it's still a family that I carry with me to this day. The company was sold to an Italian company, and now it was purchased again by one of the biggest. They're just titans in the industry. So it's that universe that I started with doesn't exist anymore. But wow, we're all still super close. Like everybody. I mean, it's a whole thing. I remember company I worked for a little bit later, we all support each other and everything. And I remember my boss at this other company says, you people from Dongia think you're so cool and you got each other's back. And I just want to let you know that there's more to this industry than just you Dongia people. And I was like, okay, but no, I mean, actually it's true. I mean, like my best friends, everybody, like, just the amount of stuff that I've learned, we're all still super connected and super close to this day.
What do you think was the bonding factor there for you?
It just was one of those things where somebody sprinkled fairy dust. Like that's really just there. I can't explain it.
Like working in a flow, really, just picking up each other's.
Yeah. I mean, there was things that, but no, it was everybody had each other's back for the most part. And, everybody was brilliant. Everybody was talented. Everybody was nice for the most part. It just was this clique of everything.
So you got your start at this like amazing company, according to your aunt, right? And everybody else in the industry. But you also had opportunities. So many of us, we get these opportunities presented to us and we just don't know what to do with them. And, there's the quote out there is that, it has to do with preparation and all this other stuff, right? I'm not going to dig into the quote because where I'm going with this is, you had an opportunity presented to you and you didn't even know it was an opportunity, but it led to such great things for you. Yeah. And I'm talking about the crumpled up piece of paper,
I know
right?
What you're talking about.
So please share that story into how you turned that opportunity into so much more.
Yeah. So Dongia, it's a residential brand. So it goes into people's homes. The top 1% of the population, but it goes into homes. And we would get in the fax machine these pages and pages and pages of and it would be like a request for 3 yards of fabric, right? But it would be like 15 pages and it would come from, let's say, 4 Seasons. And I would bring it, because I was an administrative assistant, I would bring it to my boss and she would take a piece of paper and she'd scribble just like, this fabric is X amount dollars a yard and, payment up front or something. And she'd go, okay, fax this back. And I'd be looking at this formal document, saying, request for quotation and testing and all of this in the terms. And then I'd be looking at this little piece of paper and I'd be like, okay, wait, one doesn't equal the other. And I asked my boss, I said, question, why are you just sending this back when there's this whole, formal request? And she said, we never get those projects. And she goes, our prices are too high. We're never going to get it. So it's not worth my time, but I just do it just in case. And I said, okay. I said, well, do you mind if I just start replying? Because if all you're doing is scratching down the price and all of this stuff, like, I'd like to take that off of your plate. And she was like, yeah, run with it. She's like, as long as it doesn't affect what you need to do, you're more than welcome to take it over. And pretty quickly, I think it was in about a year, Four Seasons was the number one account of the company.
Yeah.
And it was just because I was returning in kind, like, here's a formal document. And I started diving then, well, what does this test mean? How important is this for this application? So there's this whole kind of science to it, that I just started picking up and learning. And Dongia became one of the first high-end residential companies to start diving full into the hospitality market, which is the market where I live and breathe to this day, which is basically hotels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And it goes back to this whole, I'm going to use the word overachiever, but it's really just this inner desire to do more for you. It's like, here's an opportunity. And I don't know that many of us would even see it as an opportunity. It was just this thing where you said, I'll take on this project. Why not? Let me see if I could do it better or do it differently, right?
I don't even think I was thinking about it
right.
then. It was just like this curiosity. I feel like with me, it's always like, I'll tackle something that doesn't make sense. Like, so that didn't make sense.
Yeah.
So let me make sense of this and then see what happens. It's not so much a drive. It's just trying to make sense of things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's inquisitiveness.
Well, there is a drive, but yeah.
There's a drive, but I mean that's really the entrepreneur is we're inquisitive.
Yeah.
We're a problem solver. We're seeing something differently and we're saying, well, why not do it that way? Mm-hmm. We don't know if it's going to succeed or not, right?
No idea.
I mean, that's part of the entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Is we don't know if it's going to succeed or not. And
I'm still trying to figure that out.
Right. and I want to bring that to the business world too, to our aspiring C-suite executives out there, in that it's the same thing when you think about management, when you think about your experience at Bloomingdale's or management courses, they're also just experimenting and problem solving, and it evolves and changes, and it's up to you to make that change. And you can do that in a corporation. There's a lot more restrictions.
There are.
But raise your hand, right? And look for something a little bit different. Now, if you can't raise your hand, you could do a side hustle, which somebody else here has done, right? Mm-hmm. So while you're working, and I don't think it was at Dongia, right?
No.
Yeah, you were working at another company. And that's when you started working on Floor 13. And please, let's get to this name, right? Because I didn't understand the name either at first.
Right.
And also, I want to make a little mental note for both of us here to speak about your business card, because you also have a kind of like a little life hack on your business. Oh, you don't know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Oh, okay, you do now.
Yeah,
okay, great. A little life hack on people's business cards. We'll get into that in a second, but let's go to Floor 13, the side hustle and the name. Yeah.
So, from Dongia, I started working at a lot more other companies. And while Dongia, they sold, like I said, sofas and fabric and lighting. So I started working with the design team at Dongia to alter things for the hospitality industry, because not only were their budgets smaller, right? So they can't afford a $200 a yard silk. They can't use silk because silk wouldn't pass the codes, because there's flammability codes for upholstery. You have to have, they call it double rubs. And if you think about like even a banquet booth, the amount of times people get up and down from it, that's a rub. Each one is a rub. So the fabric has to last, 50,000 at least rubs in hospitality, because people are getting up and down, up and down, up and down. It gets a lot more wear. So anyway, there's this whole entire thing, and you can't use silk. So now we have to get this silk fabric that's specified for all the guest rooms at the Four Seasons, and we need to make it into a polyester. And well, how are we going to do that? So, and we started doing that with lighting. We started doing it with the furniture. We started going to China, all of that stuff. So, but my forte really was with fabric. Of course, that was what I always knew. I didn't know about UL listing of, lights. I knew about fabric. So I started working for other fabric companies. And I got better and better at it. And I started knowing more and more mills and more people in the industry. And it just kind of expanded. And then I ended up working for a company as a national that sold, I'll just say a decorative product that wasn't fabric. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, people started approaching me from other fabric companies, and they were like smaller ones. And they're like, hey, we could never afford to have you on our staff, but we're having problems with our stuff getting knocked off, and we really want these, hotel jobs, and we don't want people copying our fabrics. So can you start sourcing this out for us? And they're like, since you're not doing fabrics anymore, we don't think it's a big deal. And I was like, yeah, I guess I could do that. Sure. And so I was like, and then I thought about it. I was like, well, I really don't want them to know who my mills or my sources are. I feel like I've worked hard at those contacts and those things. So I guess I'll need to start a company. And I remember I was in a car accident, and I was asking my accident lawyer, I was like, do you know anything about starting companies? Because I got to do this thing. And he was like, yeah, sure, I could do he goes, I'll roll it into your thing. And so he was like, you got to come up with a name. And I was like, oh, okay. So I've always had a thing with the number 13. I don't know why. The numbers, it's not like in my birthday or anything. I just thought it was funny that people get freaked out by a number. And Dan Marino, I'm a Dolphin fan, and he was number 13. And I'm like, well, that number worked out for him. Okay. I mean, he didn't get to a Super Bowl, but whatever.
I was thinking that.
But, it was just, it's just like this stupid thing. And then I always, thought how it was funny how people use, like, if working in the Chrysler building, there's no 13th floor. And I've always noticed that, I worked on Park Avenue, 399 Park. There was no 13th floor. And it was just always something I thought was so funny, right? Because the 14th floor is the 13th floor. So if you're on the 14th floor,
you're on the 13th.
You're on the 13th floor. And just because you're calling it the 14th floor doesn't make a difference. So why are we getting all superstitious on this? And that kind of rebranding. So the 14th floor is rebranded to be, and the 13th floor becomes hidden. So I was like, well, if I'm working for XYZ company and I'm sourcing something out for them, they're not going to know the mill. They're going to have to pay me a check. But when they get the fabric, they're going to call it X, Y, and Z company's fabric. So I was like, well, I'm getting rebranded just like the 13th floor of a building. So I just went with Floor 13 Textiles.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That is so cool. When I was reading that.
People think I do flooring now. And I'm like, no, we don't have rugs. We don't have flooring.
It's so hard when you come up with a name and you have this like great story and then people think something else. Like, like with Dent, people think I deal with dentistry.
Oh,
that's what we get. We get a lot of like dentist inquiries, and I'm like, oh, should I change it? But it's named after Denise and Tenley, but anyway, back to Floor 13. It is so cool. Like, and then when I was reading that and I was reading about hotels and the 13th floor, like I'd heard that. I just wonder, I didn't do any research on this before this podcast, but I'm like, do they still do that? Or is there really no 13th floor? And then I was thinking, that is crazy. It
is crazy. And, there's some that do it and there are some that don't now. I think it depends on the building owner.
Depends on what kind of superstition they have. That's so wild. So I guess the Empire State Building doesn't have a 13th floor or something, right? It doesn't.
No.
Wow. They're like, we're not taking that chance. Which made me think about, actually with this whole 13th floor thing, it was also making me think about like these, how we, I forget the term for it, but essentially by thinking that something bad's going to happen, something bad happens, right? By thinking, so it's like the first person who put the 13th floor in, they're like, well, that place is going to burn down. And next thing you know, it's got an electric fire.
Right.
It's like, so you always got to be careful of these things. The other thing I promised our audience here is that you have a little hack for business cards. And I thought that was interesting too, because everybody has a different way of their little style on their business card, or at least you hope there's a style, right? Like not just cut and dry. But you had mentioned something, I forget if it was in your bio or in another interview that you had done about people's business cards.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're kind of, how many piles do you have on your desk of just business cards?
Right.
And it's one of those things that people look at and then it goes to the side. And when I was doing my business cards, you know, you had this second side. And, you know, so I see sometimes people like, they'll put their logo on one side and then you flip it and then it has the information. But I was like, well, if I'm trying to project something of what my company is about and who I am, then that second spot isn't just my logo, right? Because what does that really say? No, it's advertising. It's a place to put a photograph. Because you only really have somebody's attention with a business card for 15 seconds.
Short amount of time, yeah.
Short amount of time. So I put my product on the...
You're paying so that you could stand out a little bit. And that's so like people, we come back from networking events and we have a stack of business cards. And it's which business card are you going to get back to, right?
Yeah.
And some of them you're going to get back to because you had a really great connection. And that's wonderful, right? Because really the connection should really stand out. But some of them you look at and you go, who was this person? I don't remember meeting them or whatever. And if the business card doesn't say much, right, you kind of move it to the side. Yeah. Maybe you follow up. Maybe you don't, whatever it is.
And now I'm going to tie it back into clothing.
Go ahead.
What we were talking about earlier when you're at a business event and how you're dressed portrays you have the Den 10 on the T-shirt or, you know, I forget his name with the hat or, you know, whatever.
Tom.
Yes. Tom, exactly. And then, but it translates to the business card. Like there's all these little things about your brand. So you can't let any detail really go to waste because you got to stand out. Whether you're in a big industry or a small industry, you have competition, right? Or you have a prospective client wants to remember you. How are you going to be memorable? And it's like all of these little things. It's all these little touches, whether, you know, it's in your email, it's your business card, it's how you're dressed. It's just all these little things are things that go into somebody's head and they remember. Yeah.
And you don't know which one is going to land with them.
No.
I was just speaking with one of my salespeople about this because he was talking about leaving voicemail matters. And I said, you're right. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter, right? No one's going to listen to your 2 to 3 minute sales pitch in a voicemail, 100%. But if you say your name, your company's name, briefly what you do, and a callback number, they're going to hear it. They're going to listen to it. They're going to delete it. They're going to not pay attention to it. They're not going to call you back. Don't expect any of that. But that's one.
Yep.
That's one touch.
One touch. It's all about the touches.
One touch.
I always say
your
that.
Your T-shirt brand, your hat, your way you dress is 2. Your business card. So it all kind of plays together. I love how you tied all that together. Thank you for doing that. that was really great.
See, I listen to your podcast because I know how you always are like, all right, I'm going to go back to that original thing. So I'm learning from you.
You're like, I'm going to go back.
It.
I know.
Yeah.
But to me, that brings into your score, right? And what I mean by score is not your personal score as to who you are, which is a 10. But you also work at or volunteer at SCORE?
Volunteer.
I don't know. Volunteer, thank you, at SCORE, which is part of the business administration, helping small businesses become something, right? Become who they are. And they played a role in Floor 13, right? Yeah.
So when I started this company, I was simultaneously let go from the other company. We didn't mesh. I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? And I remember the company was in Yonkers, but I was living up here in Fishkill. And I remember driving on the Taconic in tears because I have 3 little kids at home. I was just let go from this company for standing my ground. And some would say, like, why did you do that? Of course you were going to get fired, and it was an ethical thing. But I just kind of didn't know what I was going to do. And, my marriage was falling apart at the time. I got divorced shortly later. And New York State sent me a letter. And it said, okay, well, we're sorry, you're going to be on
unemployment.
Unemployment, thank you. But we have this program called SEEP. I'm going to butcher what it stands for, but it's like self-employment assistance program. I think I got it right. And basically what it is this program with New York State, if you fit into this weird algorithm, God knows what it is, where when you hit unemployment, they see something where they're like, okay, this person could become an entrepreneur. And they offer you this package where you can receive unemployment simultaneously of earning an income in a business you start. So normally with unemployment, second you start earning income, they cut you off.
Right.
This was like, you got 6 months to get your stuff together.
Yeah.
But we're going to not only pay you the unemployment, we're going to send you to training. So you have all these steps that you need to do in order to continue with this program. And one of the things that I needed to do was I needed to get a mentor. And one of the organizations that they recommended was SCORE, which was known for volunteers who are retired from, different sectors of corporate America or entrepreneurship that would mentor you in your business. So I signed on with these two wonderful gentlemen who didn't quite understand what I was doing, but gave me really good advice. And they really helped me think that this was something I could do. Whether it was going over my business plan that I was writing and all this stuff that I had no idea about, because business plan, they didn't teach me that. There was still all these things that I needed to learn. And, what accounting software, and all this stuff to because I decided, of course, to go ahead with Floor 13. And I did have to ask New York State for a special exception because I said, well, I kind of already started a company. But at the time, there was no income. I said, so I haven't. It's there. It started. And they said, well, technically, but okay, since you didn't make any money, we'll let it go. So I had these two guides for Floor 13, and I had to take these webinars and all these. I don't think they were webinars back then. There was some in person, but only 10 years ago, there was webinars. So
I was going to say, it's 2012.
Yeah. So anyway, and they stayed with me for a few years. I would always contact them when I had a problem. They set me on the path to get financing for the company. And so it's been, so I guess it was I've been doing it 18 months now. 18 months ago, I decided that I wanted to be a part of SCORE to help entrepreneurs that are starting, or even entrepreneurs that you could call them. Right. It's just hey, I have this problem, and we're trained to a point, but, we hold hands. We don't, if you're an entrepreneur, you got to do it yourself. But at least there's this voice and there's somebody, that could be accountability. And I'm just loving it. I really love doing it. It's just a lot of fun, and everybody that I'm mentoring is just, I love their ideas and their spark, and it fills me. It's a good thing.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
You said it too with entrepreneurship is there is no answer to the questions that we have, right? There sometimes is, right? There's just go to there, fill out this form, or go to that website, or, but it's really on us. It's really on the person. And again, just to relate it back to our business world of the corporation, the corporate world of anybody trying to get into the C-suite, it's the same thing. It's on you. There's no blueprint to how this happens. There's a path, but it's on you to take action, to do the work, to do it. So you can ask them the questions and they can kind of direct you and point you, but you got to do it, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing that you said about these mentors, which I think is so important for people to hear, is that they helped you believe in yourself.
Yeah.
You said that was, they helped me see that I can do it.
Right.
And, that self-belief is so important in everything we do.
Yeah. Yeah. And along the way, so I started Floor 13 just over 10 years ago. And not only with SCORE, but there's been coaches or whatever else that kind of I think when I started Floor 13, and again, like I said, I was coming out of divorce. I had, or just getting divorced. I had the 3 kids, and I really went into the kind of almost an isolation thing, right? Where I was I started this out of my house, but I would just sit at my desk, and I would, it kind of, it started kind of being almost like a vicious circle where, I was like, what the hell am I doing here? You know what I mean? And having those people reaching out, whether it's through SCORE or different mentors, all these people going, wow, this is really cool what you're doing. Have you looked at this and have you looked at that? And just forcing myself out there, even with the chamber, forcing myself into the chamber, forcing myself into these other groups. I'm on the Town of Fishkill Zoning Board, putting myself in there, putting myself into all these situations. But there's all these support people that you could find, just don't sit behind your desk. That was one of the worst things that I did.
Yeah. So pushing through that uncomfort.
Yeah, totally.
And it's true because I've experienced that with you actually in that when I met you at the chamber and I said, so, who do you want to meet and what do you want to work with? And you're like, well, actually, we're kind of all set. We work with hotels and everything. And I'm like, well, why are you here? And you go, to meet people.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, that's cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, because everybody is in this, is doing it, At the chamber, yeah, you have entrepreneurs, but you also have people that, are working up the corporate ladder. Mm-hmm. And so it's a good energy just to kind of
be around. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a really great energy to be around because people are there and they're networking in different ways. Mm-hmm. And I know that there's so many conversations about the right way to network. And honestly, it's really just get out there and be there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we want to try to help, of course, the young networkers who are just trying to put a business card and give you their sales pitch at one of these mixers and help them realize that you don't need to do that. This might not be the place for it.
Right.
But maybe you do need to do that. You need to do it to learn. Yeah. I did that. It's what gets you to that next level. It's what taps somebody on the shoulder like you that might turn to that person and say, hey, you got 5 minutes? Let's just chat real quick.
But it's so hard to start doing that. I would sit, again, at my desk, petrified. So, I would sign up to oh, yeah, I'm going to go to that event, And then it would be an hour before that event. And I would just freeze and I'd be like, nope, I'm not going. I got to cook dinner for the kids and no. And I would make excuses and I wouldn't go. And I really had to force myself.
I know you said you were going through a divorce, and so I could imagine that there was a lot weighing on your mind. Mm-hmm. But what was the other fears that were happening that were stopping or preventing you from stepping out and going to these events or different things?
I think it was just being bullied as a kid. You go back to all of that, right? So when you're kind of even people who you thought were friends that would just, end up not, and all of that stuff. I kind of had this big fear of going out and putting myself out there and, oh my God, what if I go to this event and nobody wants to talk to me? What if I'm just standing there looking hey, I'm here, but you know what I mean? You don't want to be that person. But I had this fear of talking to somebody going, oh, why is she talking to me? You know what I mean? It was always that was in the back of my head. And, Yeah. So I think you had Lori Ostrowski on
Yes.
one of your podcasts. So she is the Hudson Valley Women in Business.
Yes.
And that's one of those that I kept chickening out of going. And so one day she sent out something to the group like, okay, we're having a meeting and I need some volunteers. I need a greeter. And I said, that's it. I'm going to volunteer to be a greeter. I don't know anybody, but at least I have a job, right? So I wasn't going to be standing in the corner, like I'm going to have a purpose. And that way I'm going to show up too. Like I have no excuses. I need to show up.
Right.
And so I went to that event and I sat at the table and I was a greeter and Lori and I started talking and somehow she latched on to exactly what I was doing really quickly. And so she would always give me a job. She was like, okay, we're having another event. Do you want a job? And I'm like, yes, I'll do that. And that's how I just started and that just really just broke me out of my shell to do everything else.
That's funny. Yeah. I mean, Lori's brilliant, but
yes.
I will say from organizing events, we're also just looking for volunteers.
Yes.
And if you're raising your hand, we're grabbing you.
Yeah. And if you're sitting at home behind your desk, volunteer, really just throw yourself out there.
I'm so happy you said that because I was going to ask you for anybody who is nervous or petrified right now, what advice you have. And please just elaborate. You've already elaborated on these, but I wanted to share back what you just said, which is you volunteered for something. So there was a commitment there for you. Mm-hmm. And so by committing yourself to the organization, not just to committing to going, but committing to something there of volunteering for something. And then the other word that you used was purpose, that you had a purpose to go there. So there was an intention and there was a purpose and you knew what you were doing in that role of, I'm going to greet people. So I'm here to shake hands, say hello, and tell them where to go or where to be or whatever
right.
it is. Anything else that would help these people that are maybe a little bit nervous or shy to get out and break through?
I think that's the biggest thing. And then find that one person that actually you connect with, but is outgoing. I got comfortable with the Hudson Valley Women in Business group at the chamber. Freaked the hell out of me, and I did try it a few years back and I was that wallflower, and then I had somebody that I knew that was in the chamber and she's like, why don't you come back? And I was like, I don't know. And so she convinced me and she just took me by the hand and she made all the introductions and now I'm very comfortable, but sometimes you do need that kind of, that if you're not that person, find that person.
Yeah, I like that. Find that person. Simon Sinek talks about that where he's an introvert, mm-hmm. but he's like, but I always find the extrovert.
Yes.
And I go
absolutely.
with them because I'll eat the cheese and crackers while they're talking to people, but they'll introduce me and then, and then they make those connections, which mm-hmm. is, I'm an extrovert. So I'm always happy to do that. I love doing that for people or with people. Another thing that I just heard recently in a book that I'm reading right now is that a lot of the times that we go into these networking situations and we're nervous, or even just in general of just going to a party or whatever, a lot of times it's because we're thinking about ourselves. And not in a mean way of we're being selfish in any way like that, but it's because we're thinking about ourselves, of our self-perception of what are mm-hmm. people thinking of me? How am I carrying myself? And which is all good, right? We should all take a good look in the mirror and realize that. But I wouldn't call it advice, but I guess I am calling it advice. But his advice is more of ask them about themselves, get them to open up to you,
right.
and ask them about so tell me about your business. Tell me about how you got started. Tell me about why you chose this outfit or whatever mm-hmm. it is, right? And as they do that, you start being able to just be a part of the conversation and less in your own head.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really great advice
it is good advice.
To share with everyone. So you're doing SCORE, you're doing all these things, you're
yes.
just this amazing entrepreneur, and yet all these people, I wanted to kind of wrap up a little bit, but I can't because this is so important and I guess maybe I saved the best for last here, but so many people, wherever it was in your journey, right? I can't remember exactly where it was in your journey, but so many people use this word should in your life. Mm-hmm. You should.
Right.
And it probably is part of what froze you at your desk.
Yes.
But you were able to finally break through that, and you had a breakthrough on it. And I just want you to share that with everyone.
Okay. Well, it came from, I read a book called $1 Million Women by Julia Pimsleur. And it really kind of like, it was the introduction for me on capital. I didn't know about raising capital. I just thought, if you're an entrepreneur, you better have saved the money or you better have a rich parent. I had neither, but I still did it. But I didn't know that, that there was investors and like all of this stuff. And I just read the book and I was like, wow, that's amazing. And long story short, I started to know Julia. We connected on LinkedIn and I'm like, wow, I can't believe I'm talking to this person that, and she was the first person that said to me, don't listen to the shitters.
Mm.
And because, and she, in our little group that we had, she always said, one of the rules of the group is don't tell anybody. You should. Mm. Because if you're not, if you haven't done it, you can't tell somebody. You could say, hey, I have this idea. Mm-hmm. Hey, I have this suggestion. Mm-hmm. But should is such a, you should do this. Mm-hmm. Like it almost means like you have to, right? And it's all these kind of like ways of, what you should be doing. And so one of the things that I kind of got stuck with was working out of my home and having a national company. And, I have the sample department down in my basement. We do have some warehousing going on in the garage. It's like a whole entire thing. And I was like, well, when I get to a certain level, I should move into an office.
Shitting on yourself.
I should myself. And because that's what everybody else has. None of my competition is working out of their house. Right? And so I got the office space. I think this is what you were alluding to, right? Mm-hmm. And got an office space with a warehouse and the whole entire what I should be doing for my industry. And it was overwhelming. I mean, the rent was, that was a factor, right? Mm-hmm. My company was doing well enough. And it was 2019. So you see where I'm going with this. Because then 2020 hit. And for hospitality, all the hotels shut down. Mm. My whole industry screeched to a halt.
Wow.
So, 90% less in sales. Yeah, it was a rough 2 years. And so I couldn't afford the office space anymore. And we moved everything back into the house. And I am so happy. Like, it's where, I'm going to say it, it's where I should be. It's where the company should be. And, we have we have offsite warehouse and everything else, but, it's why I started the company. It's why I went on this path. I wanted to be there for my kids. I want my freedom.
Yeah.
You can't put a price on that stuff. At the end of the day, that's not the salary. Mm-hmm. The salary is, I work from home, go to the gym every morning. I am able to take my kids to school when they have a meltdown over their hair in the morning. I'm able to go see their plays. I'm able to go to their sports events. And, that's why I did this. I didn't do this to be anything else but myself.
I love that. That's wonderful. And yeah, I think the story of shooting, it's so many of us experience that in our lives and in our world. And I think what I want to say is people are doing it. They have good intention.
Yes.
They're shooting on you because they have good intention. They're hoping to help you. But to realize that, I realize at least that when someone's shooting on me, part of my reason why I don't like it is because you're removing my choice. And as entrepreneurs, as business leaders, whatever you're trying to accomplish in your life, you need choice. And it needs to be your choice.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's what it removes. But I think that there are times where, like you said, it should be home. That's the choice you made. You made that choice. And it's a beautiful choice. I as an entrepreneur, I get to go to my daughter's school as the center's parent. She's in kindergarten. I get to be a part of that. And I look forward to that because I don't know when that opportunity will go away, when they get older, or maybe I have a meeting that I can't turn down for whatever reason, that I choose to not turn down, right?
Right.
But I can. And that's the choice that I made. So I think that it's such a powerful message that you have there of breaking that. And for you, and I know that you also said this with full compassion and empathy, but COVID allowed for that to happen for you.
It did.
And there's so much bad that happened, and we acknowledge that and are super compassionate towards it. But you said this pause allowed for this like reframing of our lives, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we lost family members, for sure. But man, that was just like it's in a way I needed it, but I just wish it didn't come with all the other stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, we wish.
There's always a good and a bad, right?
Always. But focused on the good with you is, so you are at SCORE, you're volunteering there, you're helping people there, and you're doing so much more in your community too. You mentioned on the Fishkill zoning board, and then a Girl Scout leader, co-leader, you said, right?
Co-leader, right. Yeah. My twins, they started with Girl Scouts when they were very little. I think it's an amazing organization. I was a Girl Scout myself, though I quit when I reached I had to wear all the green. Maybe it was the green, but no, and they love it and they've stuck with it. And they're up for they're getting their gold award soon. They're going to have to prepare for that, but that's the next step, which is, kind of like the Boy Scout, Eagle Scout kind of thing.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's a big deal. But yeah, we have a group of high school, girls that are continuing with it. And it's great because, I brought them to a Hudson Valley Women in Business, event, and there's just like their spark and everything is just, it's great to watch. It's great to see their ideas, how they want to serve the community, because there's that big aspect to it. I'm proud of them for sticking with it.
That's so cool. Yeah. And, you're between your daughter, your oldest daughter going to the school that she's going to and the degree that she's getting and then applying to the White House. 100%. I love also that message that you gave her of like, even if I don't get it, like, what if I don't get, who cares? Who cares?
You wrote the essay, you tried. So you try again next year. And then if you don't get it, you have that experience.
Right.
You have that almost like, just to write that essay to potentially get this, right?
Yes.
She learned a lot from it.
Yeah, and the commitment with the Girl Scouts. I mean, that's a commitment. So these are all great things that you're teaching your daughters. I love that they went to the Hudson Valley Women in Business. I was just at a chamber event, and my daughter asked me. She goes, "Why can't they plan these things in the afternoon so we can go?" And I was like, "That's cool." I was like, "Yeah,
you can't take her to the business after hours."
It was past their bedtime.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're a little young for that. But I'm, with some of the stories that you shared and that we're talking about here is that the exposure, right? The exposure to our youth. You were exposed. You were working with your mom with the semiconductors. You were there.
Yeah.
And now you did it for your daughters and you're watching them blossom from it all. So such a great message to share. As we conclude this, the other thing that you also are part of is the Chamber Foundation Women's Leadership Alliance. And I'm just interested
that I just signed up. So.
No, I know you just signed up. You don't have much to say there, but
I didn't tell Darren, and Darren's sitting next to me. But
but it's a great foundation.
Yeah. He's like, don't volunteer for one more thing.
It's so hard, right? It's so hard not to, because we see the need. And so, as we finalize, what I'm interested in is this idea of service that you have is, instilling it in your daughters with the Girl Scouts, being a volunteer at SCORE. And I'm just interested in this idea of service and its importance in your life.
Well, one of the things that I'm doing is I'm trying to see what Phil's is, I did overextend myself during COVID, volunteering for a lot of things, but it has to kind of like give back to me. So, yeah, there's a selfish aspect to it.
Well, you said, you get great joy out of the mentorship.
But if it's going to be my time, then it has to be something that it isn't beating me down; it's lifting me up.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's a great message. That if you're going to serve, if you're going to volunteer, that it helps bring you up and rise you to new levels and make networking connections like we did at the Chamber together. This has been just a wonderful experience with you today.
It's been a lot of fun.
How can people find you? This will all be in the show notes, of course, but how can people find you, reach out to you?
So both Facebook and Instagram is at Floor 13 Textiles, TEXTILES. And then www.floor13textiles.com.
Very cool. And just one last question here, just out of curiosity. What's one of the hotels, big name hotels right now that your stuff is in, that your textiles are in?
We just did 4 phases of the Atlantis and the Bahamas. So that's really cool. But we're in Hilton, Sandals, Marriott's, we're everywhere. Yeah.
I thought that was so cool when we were talking at, it was the Business After Hours at the, in Poughkeepsie. I forget the name of the place, but anyway, and you were telling me that and I was like, whoa. I was like, that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
So cool. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
This was wonderful. And shout out to Darren for, chauffeuring you.
I know. Thank you, Darren.
Awesome. Thanks. Thank you for listening to The Michael Esposito Show. For show notes, video clips, and more episodes, go to michaelespositoinc.com/podcast. Thank you again to our sponsor, Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. That's DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den10, you're giving back on a global scale. This episode was produced by Uncle Mike at the iHeart Studios in Poughkeepsie. Special thanks to Lara Rodrian for the opportunity and my team at Michael Esposito Inc.